Okay, so thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce myself briefly, even though I know most of you today. So I'm Katie. I am a certified pediatric sleep consultant. I am also the founder of Little Bean. So I am mom to Liam and baby Madeline. And when Liam was born, we had a really complicated reflux diagnosis. And we went through months of uncertainty with a really fussy baby who was chronically overtired and terribly upset a lot of the time. And around that time, I did this deep dive into everything baby sleep. I read everything I could get my hands on, and I started to realize that this was a place where I could really affect change. And it was such a monumental difference in my ability to parent that I really fell in love with the idea of being able to help other families navigate the somewhat muddy waters of infant sleep. And so that's where Little Bean comes from. And we are no judgment sleep support. We offer advice from newborn up to sort of later toddler years. And really, it's all about just helping you get quality rest for your family. I'll let Gail introduce herself.
I'm Gail, and I am a registered nurse, and I am a board certified lactation consultant, and I own a lactation center in Northbrook, Illinois, and it's called New Mother, New Baby. So I've been there. We've been there for 15 years. And actually I've been a lactation consultant for 27 years, which is really hard to believe. And I'm also an herbalist, and I just love working with moms and babies and helping with breastfeeding. And I just want everybody to have a good breastfeeding journey, whatever that may look like. And so the mom will feel good about it. So that's a little bit about me.
Okay. So together, we've come together basically to launch this web series where we kind of tackle all things baby sleep and feeding. So we've already run Newborn Foundations, which was all about, baby, like very small baby sleep. And then today we're going to talk about regressions. So today we're going to cover what are sleep regressions, signs that you are in a sleep regression, the difference between developmental leaps and cognitive sleep regressions and skills-based regressions. And then we'll talk through some of the core pillars of how to support your child through regressions by age, because while they're all very similar, each regression has a different cause. And so we'll talk through each of those. And then inevitably, there will always be periods where you get off track. And so we'll talk about what you need to do to get back on track when scheduling goes out the window. Before we even start to get into the world of sleep regressions, I just want to touch base on what sleep foundations are. Sleep foundations really set the stage for good infant sleep. And without good sleep foundations, without meeting the pillars of sleep foundations, what we find is that regressions that are already periods of disruption become longer periods of greater disruption. And so by really working with sleep foundations, we can make sure that we're offering our children the best chance to get sleep through periods of disruption. So the two pillars of sleep foundations that we work with are environment and structure. So when it comes to sleep environment, we want to make sure that our baby is in a very, very dark room, that we're using white noise to minimize any disruptions, and offer environmental continuity so that if they do wake between cycles, they experience that feeling of safety and support, and they're able to drift back into their next sleep cycle. We also want to make sure that baby's in a nice, firm, safe sleep space and that there's nothing else in their crib. And we want the crib empty, mainly for safe sleep, but also because we don't want to have anything that could cause distractions. So this goes for mobiles, it goes for like stuffed animals, bumpers, blankets. We don't want anything that baby can play with in the crib or that could cause any injury or harm. When it comes to structure, we talk a lot about bookending our day. So we want to make sure that we have a reliable and predictable start time at the beginning of every day and a reliable and predictable bedtime at the end of every day. And in between, we want to make sure that we are giving baby lots of exposure to daylight, that we have consistent pre-sleep routines, including nap routines and bedtime routines. And then we are working with either wake windows or by the clock scheduling to make sure that baby is not becoming overtired during the day. We know that overtired babies flood their bodies with cortisol, which causes additional stress, which is a stress hormone, which prevents them from falling and then staying asleep. So by working with wake windows or making sure that baby is scheduled appropriately, we can ensure that they're not becoming overtired and therefore have the best chance to go to sleep. So what's a sleep regression? A sleep regression is any period of disruption where a baby who's been sleeping well or okay, then suddenly has periods, extended periods of difficulty sleeping. These stretches are usually underpinned by additional night wakings. We might have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep during nap times. During these stretches, sleeping patterns change dramatically for the worse, but they are usually associated with some form of cognitive or physical skill-based development. Regressions can last anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks. And where it gets really complicated is sometimes they will have a pretty enormous impact on your baby, and sometimes you won't even notice them happening. And so they can be somewhat unpredictable in when or if they arrive and then how they manifest for your child. Regressions are actually progressions. And what this means is they're actually really beautiful periods of significant physical and cognitive development. And so while you might find increased waking, difficulty sleeping, all these things are enormously frustrating, but what they actually are is growth and development. And so while you're up with your baby at 4 in the morning for the 18th night in a row, it's very helpful to remember that it's uncertainty brought on by change. These regressions happen on a fairly regular schedule. There's 6 in the first 2 years of life, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, and 2 years. Each one is different and typically underpinned by cognitive and physical motor skill development change. Signs of a sleep regression include baby starts to fight naps, naps become increasingly short, cat naps become regular, maybe baby starts to fight bedtime, or maybe baby goes to bed smoothly and pops awake an hour later and every hour on the hour after that. What we see in sleep regressions is that sleep becomes unpredictable and can become a challenge. And so where your child was maybe not waking so frequently in the night before, they start to wake on multiple times through the night. Developmental leaps were developed by the team at Wonder Weeks, and where regressions are typically associated with some sort of physical skill as well. Wonder Weeks leaps are significant cognitive changes. And so I want to touch on the difference between a developmental leap and regression, because they sometimes come at the same time. And typically leaps will be a cause or part of the cause of a regression. And so it's really important that we understand developmental leaps. Developmental leaps are normally cognitive, and if you haven't started following Wonder Weeks, I really suggest you do so. It's actually quite incredible to watch as your child picks up the skills almost exactly as they say. And obviously every child is different. Every child hits milestones at different times, maybe a couple weeks before or after. But the Wonder Weeks leaps are actually really, really good at predicting changes in cognitive development in your children. And then they're also really good when your baby is nonverbal at understanding what is causing these periods of uncertainty, fussiness, and clinginess. And so during these times of cognitive leaps, what we see is that children might experience more separation anxiety. They might be a little bit clingier during the day, more upset, and that's due to the change in the environment around them and due to the change in their recognition of the environment around them. And so what we see is, maybe your child starts to understand the difference of underneath and above and side to side and relationships. And you can actually see that in their face as they're playing and experimenting with their toys. So determining whether something is a leap or a regression, typically a regression will be linked to a leap as the leap being part of their cause. Leap is mainly cognitive. It's typically characterized by periods of increased fussiness and clinginess, where regressions are broken sleep that aren't necessarily otherwise manifesting in mood, other than being overtired. And we know that overtired babies are cranky and more difficult to settle. Leaps are more predictable in their start and their end, where regressions can last anywhere between 2 weeks and 6 weeks. And in the case of the 2-year one, sometimes even longer than that. Regressions are typically just fighting sleep in many forms. So where leaps have an impact throughout the day, we just see that regressions manifest as fighting sleep at different times. Skills-based regressions are really important to recognize because our way of managing and dealing with skills-based regressions is slightly different than the ones that come with cognitive development and emotional attachment. So skills-based regressions are caused by baby practicing a significant new physical or gross motor skill through the night. And we know that babies experience active REM sleep. And active REM sleep differs from adult REM sleep because adults during REM sleep typically experience a form of sleep paralysis. So during infant REM sleep, we know that babies are active, they might seem more awake. And you see this a lot with newborns. One of the main things we say for newborns is don't immediately run into the room when it looks like baby is awake. And that's because often during active REM sleep, it mimics awake time, but they're still asleep. During active REM sleep, when it comes to skills-based regression, baby starts moving around and practicing gross motor skills that they're learning during the day, but they're still asleep. And the difficulty with these skills-based regressions is that they'll often move themselves into positions where they will get stuck. And it's the act of getting stuck in an uncomfortable position, which then causes the waking. These disruptions are often very significant and peak right before your child masters a new skill. And so you'll see them practicing this new skill during the day, and typically it crescendos until they are able to complete the skill, and then the regression goes away. I just do want to say very clearly that these milestones on the right here, rolling, sitting, crawling, and the dates that go along with them, those in my experience are very early. I've taken them from the Baby Sleep Science site. And they're accurate in that that's typically when you will see baby practicing those skills. And some babies may complete those skills at those ages. But in my experience, that's quite early. What we do see is that around 4 to 5 months, babies typically able to at least flip in one direction. For example, at 6 months, maybe they're able to sit unaided, but not pull themselves up to sitting. So every baby is different. And if you don't meet the milestones, I wouldn't panic. If you are super worried, I suggest you talk to your pediatrician. With all regressions, despite their cause, we want to stick with these 3 pillars. Don't panic, stay consistent, and offer support. And I was talking to Gail about this right before we started. I think anytime you have a baby that sleeps really well and suddenly they stop sleeping well, there is a tendency to panic and we start throwing anything we can at the solution as a solution at the child. And so where you have a baby that's maybe not been feeding through the night, maybe they're only feeding once at 5 a.m., they wake up at 2 and they don't seem like they're going to go to sleep, so we feed them. And then we've started a pattern of feeding through the night again. Particularly in your early regressions, if we start feeding through the night, then baby gets their calories mixed up, and it's really easy to slip into a reverse cycling where they're then feeding all night and just chilling during the day. And so first things first, we don't want to panic. We want to stay calm. Regressions pass. All periods of sleep disruption will pass eventually. So don't panic, stay calm, stay as consistent as possible, and then intervene and offer support as required. And we'll look at what support means based on the different regression and based on the different skills that we're picking up at the time. So our 4-month regression is typically, I like to call it the big one, because sometime around 3 months, we start to see sleep coming together. We see longer, more beautiful stretches of night sleep. We're probably seeing more consistent napping. And then as a new parent, it can be super confronting to then have your child seemingly forget how to sleep. And so this is the one that's kind of the most shocking for new parents, because you think you're kind of getting it together. You think you're sort of hitting your stride, things are going well, and then everything seems to go up in the air. So what causes your 4-month sleep regression is actually significant cognitive development that changes the pattern of sleep cycles. So where your newborn was able to do huge, long stretches of sleep, suddenly your sleep cycles have matured, and those sleep cycles are 35 minutes or so. They range between sort of 32 and 40 minutes. That coupled with the fact that your baby is now aware of their surroundings and their environment. So environment becomes really important in ensuring that your baby's able to connect their sleep cycles. And then sometimes for the lucky parents, this is then combined with rolling. So the best way to manage the 4-month sleep regression, and most of the regressions afterwards actually, is through fostering and teaching independent sleep and soothing skills. And this looks different for every family. This might look like sleep training. This might look like really focusing in on drowsy but awake. It really depends on your child's temperament. But this is when, and you might have heard somebody use this analogy before, but if you imagine that you fell asleep on the sofa and you woke up in your bed 30 minutes later, it would be very shocking. It would be quite, and you'd be awake because you'd be somewhere different. And then the same applies to your baby. So if you've been rocking them, suddenly if you're rocking them to sleep and placing them down in their crib, they know about it and they're uncomfortable about it, and it causes a form of panic. So we really want to start focusing in on our sleep environment, making sure that baby is waking up where they fell asleep. This is also a really good time to look at introducing pre-sleep routines if you haven't. Around the 6 to 8 week mark, there's Leap 3, and that is all about sequences. Baby can now join the dots about events. This comes first, that comes next. And so pre-sleep routines are really great in helping prepare your little one for getting ready to go to sleep. This removes the shock and surprise when they go down in their crib, and it gives them the opportunity to adjust the fact that now is time for sleeping, and that then helps them fall asleep faster. For 4-month and also their 6-month regression, which we'll talk about in a second, we really want to support where required, mainly using wake windows. So wake windows for younger babies, they're really sensitive to the amount of time that they can be awake before they fall asleep, before they become overtired. And so we want to make sure that during times of sleep disruption where they're not getting as much night sleep as they need, or their naps are more broken, that we're adjusting wake windows to suit their sleep needs. And so if they've had a terribly short nap, we're giving them shorter wake windows that follow. If they've missed a nap in the afternoon, we're bringing bedtime forward, but we're really adjusting the day to then manage their sleep requirements and make sure they're not becoming overtired during the day. The 6 and the 9-month regressions, I think, are the funny ones. They're also, they're based on activity, so I call them the active ones. These are the ones where you'll typically find your baby in funny positions through the night in their crib. So 6 and 9-month regressions are all about physical skill development. During this sort of 3-month period, and we group them together because if you plus or minus a month off of one of them, they typically will come as one big doozy. But also their causes are very similar. And so during this 3-month period, baby has all kinds of new physical skill development. They'll discover their limbs. They can roll back to front and back again. Often they can sit unaided. By the 7, 8, 9-month mark, they're pulling themselves up to sitting. They can creep, they can crawl. Sometimes they can pull to standing if you have a particularly active child. And so all these new physical skills mean that they often get stuck in positions that are uncomfortable, because while they may be able to get themselves into a position, a lot of times it takes them a while to learn how to get out. So with these new physical skills, we want to practice during the day. And we don't want to just practice to get to the goal. We want to be able to practice to return to lying flat as well. So if baby is learning to pull themselves up, you might see them practicing pulling up in the night, but then they'll get stuck and you'll find them sitting, or they might wake themselves because they're uncomfortable because they're sitting as opposed to lying down. The same goes for standing. You'll see them pull themselves up, and often, at least once, you'll find them kind of slumped over the edge of the railing of the crib because they've been able to pull themselves up, but then haven't been able to get themselves down. So this actually applies to rolling as well. We want to make sure every time we are practicing new skills that we are practicing how to return to flat as well, so that if they do get stuck in the night, they're able to place themselves back down to sleeping. With all regressions, we want to be as consistent in our schedule and also our approach to waking. So these times of disruption are when we see habits we wouldn't normally do come into place. We start pulling baby into bed. We start feeding all through the night again. Maybe we start rocking back to sleep where, that's not necessarily feasible with an older baby where it takes hours and hours. But you do what you have to do to get sleep, and you do what you have to support your little one to make sure that they don't become overtired, because we know that once they're overtired, they're going to be unable to sleep. And so we want to be as consistent as possible in our schedule and our routines, and then also our approach to wakings. If you've already sleep trained and your child has already been putting themselves to sleep independently, then we come back and we bring back those practices and those techniques. And so if you were using Ferber, you go back to using Ferber. If you were using gentle 3-minute or gentle 5-minute drill, you go back to using whatever technique that you were using, and your child will quickly then begin to pick up, oh yes, I need to just stay asleep here. Oh yes, I need to go over and go back to sleep. Regressions are a great time to take on sleep training. If you haven't, just because it's, there's so much change going on already, it's just easier to do it at the same time. In between your 6 and your 9-month regressions, you'll typically move to a clock-based schedule if you're not already there. When you're working with your 6-month regression, we want to really focus in on wake windows. When we're working with our 9-month regression, we really want to stick to our clock-based schedule. The other thing I want to touch on that happens between 6 and 9 months is your child will start to experience separation anxiety. This is also a result of a cognitive development. It's covered a little bit in Wonder Weeks. They basically start to realize that you are no longer in the room, and that can be frightening, and it can be unsettling, and it can cause periods of uncertainty that can manifest in the night and cause sleep disruptions. To help combat this form of separation anxiety, we really want to spend a lot of time in our nursery, spending fun time in and around our crib. So maybe you're doing laundry and you're folding laundry on the nursery floor while baby's playing in their crib with toys that are familiar. And of course, we don't put them to sleep with those toys, but we let them play with those toys during the day so that the crib becomes a space of fun. It's familiar, it's a happy place. It's not just somewhere that mom plunks me down and leaves me. We really want to make sure that the crib is somewhere where your baby feels comfortable. And around 6 months, if you haven't already moved them from their bassinet, you're going to move them to their crib. So we just want to make sure that this becomes a familiar and a comfortable space that they are happy to be. The 12-month regression, I like to call the brainy one, because this one is all about new decision-making skills. Your child is realizing that they have some independence, and maybe they're not, they're not vocal, they're not exerting it, but they're definitely starting to experiment with independence. They're starting to understand that maybe they can get into their crib and it's their choice as to whether or not they go to sleep. They've also got new physical skills that revolve around pulling up, standing, maybe they're creeping, maybe they're cruising, and maybe they're walking. And so we've got new physical skills met with new cognitive skills, and these tend to cause sleep disruptions as well. So again, practicing new motor skills. And this is a great stage to be outdoors, particularly as your child's learning to crawl, making sure we get lots of daylight during the day, lots of dark when it's time to sleep, and then giving your child lots of opportunity to practice all those super fun skills that they're doing. So pulling up, if you haven't started going to a jungle gym, you can go maybe practice the slides, start pulling to standing using some of the equipment, really getting outside and giving your child a lot of opportunity to burn off some of that excess energy. The 12-month regression is also a complicated one, because this is when we see babies start to fight that second nap, even though they may not be ready to drop it just yet. Typically, we see dropping that second nap between 14 and 17 months. And so at 12 months, they might not be able to actually go the full extent of a wake window that is, 5-6 hours long. And that can be tricky if you see them fighting that second nap. A lot of families will drop that second nap too early and then slip into this overtired cycle because baby can't actually manage the sleep cycle, the wake windows of being that long. So we really want to stick to our guns in terms of making sure that, baby is continued to be offered that second nap. And as you get into an age appropriate window, then we can look to drop that second nap. Oh, sorry, just quickly. The last thing is we want to offer baby lots of opportunity to make decisions. And so your child is probably not vocal, but they can definitely point by this stage. So maybe you're giving them the option to pick between the red sock or the blue sock, the pink fork or the blue fork, giving them lots of options during the day so they're less likely to practice that independence during our sleeping hours. Okay, your 18-month regression is an absolute doozy. And this one is it's sort of across the board, no matter who you speak to. It's the 18-month one seems to be the one that is the toughest. And that's just because you've got a full-blown toddler on your hands. You've got this independent little person who's making their own decisions. They're starting to exert their independence. They're experimenting more. Maybe they're climbing, and maybe they're climbing out of the crib. They're starting to do toddler things. And this becomes very complicated because now you're entering the realm of negotiation and other such. So what we really want to do is practice new skills, but also really, really hone in on our pre-sleep routines. So spend more time before nap, more time before bed, really getting your little one ready for the fact that they're going to sleep. Around 18 months, 2 years is when your toddler really starts to recognize what comes next more. And so they focus in on that, and they really don't like surprise. And we see a lot of, big feelings. Toddlers don't like fast transitions. They need this slow pace that really warms them up to the idea. So your pre-sleep routines become really important. This 18 months and 2 years, they also start cutting molars. Molars are tremendously painful. They're by far the most painful of all the teeth. They take a long time to come in, and they cause terrible discomfort. And so maybe your child is not able to explain yet, but we want to keep a lookout for those signs. Maybe they're pulling, or they're holding their cheeks. Maybe they're grinding their teeth more. They're sticking lots of things in their mouth. You can support them with this through offering cold, frozen, like there's the silicone straws, lots of popsicles, cold foods, and pain medication if required. 2-year regression is your finale. You now have a full-blown toddler on your hands. And in my experience, this one lasts often more than 6 weeks. This is when we see baby really start to fight that nap in general. We know that toddlers, actually, a lot of toddlers will take their nap up until they're 4 years old. But something around the 2-year regression, they really start to fight taking a nap. Maybe they start waking early, maybe bedtime changes. This is where consistency really, really, really will pay off. You want your child to continue to take a nap. We know developmentally they need to continue to at least rest during that time. And so with our 18-month and our 2-year regression, we are going to continue to offer nap no matter what. Maybe it manifests as just quiet time. Maybe they're awake the whole time and we end up bringing bedtime early, but we want to continue to offer that nap and leave it to baby as to whether or not they take it. I highly recommend for 18 months and 2-year-olds to keep them in a sleep sack for as long as possible. This will help them to stay in the crib in addition to obviously keeping them warm. They'll have a harder time crawling out of your crib. And so keeping them in a sleep sack with closed feet will often keep them in the crib for longer. So it is inevitable during sleep disruptions, during sleep regressions, that you will find yourself in a position where sleep is broken. Maybe baby's super tired because they've been waking up all night. Particularly in our younger babies, if we see that they're waking 4 or 5 times in the night and it's taking them a longer time to settle, maybe baby is then getting 7 hours of night sleep total instead of 12, and that results in an overtired baby. That means that mornings are going to be more difficult. It means that first nap is going to be harder to take, particularly if you're on a clock-based schedule. It means that through the afternoon and into your afternoon naps, baby's going to be fussier, crankier. They're going to have a harder time falling asleep. Then they're going to have a harder time at bedtime, and then your cycle is going to repeat itself. And so what we really want to do is work with wake windows for our younger babies and split the difference in the time that they woke up. And so if they are, say your child is meant to wake up at 7 in the morning and she actually wakes up at 6 a.m. So now you're trying to figure out when you're going to put them down for their first nap. You're going to split the difference. And so they woke up an hour early, you're going to put them down 30 minutes early, and then you're going to wake them 15 minutes early. And cutting this difference in half means that your day stays mainly on track while still adapting for your child. We want to make sure we are offering the ability to self-soothe. We're promoting self-settling skills where possible. And it's not always possible. There will be times with younger babies in particular where you go in and you support them to sleep. Maybe you rock them, maybe you let them sleep on your chest because you know that your child is overtired and you know that your child needs additional support to fall asleep. And that's fine. What we want to make sure we're doing is not setting new habits where they're unnecessary. So adding in feedings again, where baby's maybe not hungry, but just looking for soothing and settling and comfort. We want to make sure that we're promoting self-soothing, giving baby the chance to sleep independently. And if baby has had a crappy nap day, which will absolutely, definitely happen, then we want to make sure we are shortening wake windows through the afternoon and then bringing bedtime forward to prevent baby from going overtired where necessary. If your baby is slightly older, maybe they're 9 months plus or they're toddlers, we want to continue to work with their clock-based schedule. This means maybe adding extra time to nap. We can bring that clock-based schedule forward a little bit, but not a huge amount. We want to continue to offer our children naps, even though they may not take them. And then from there, we can adjust bedtime and bring it forward by all the way up to an hour without causing an early morning waking. All of this to prevent your baby from becoming overtired, because we know that while they might be fighting sleep, their overall sleep needs have not changed. And so, for a 4-month-old, this means they need 12 hours of night sleep and between 3 and 5 hours of day sleep. And if they're waking all through the night and they're catnapping, they're not getting what they need. And so we're going to adjust their schedules and adjust their wake windows to bring them back to their total sleep needs and make sure that we're preventing them from becoming overtired. That's the same with an older baby who maybe sleeps 12 hours at night and has a 3-hour nap in the middle of the day. If that nap is suddenly 45 minutes, then they're going to be overtired by bedtime. So we're going to bring that bedtime earlier to prevent them from getting overtired and allow them to meet some of their day sleep needs in night sleep. And while that doesn't work always, because I'm sure you're going to say to me, well, why don't we just put them to bed for 14 hours at night? And it doesn't work for an extended period of time. But when you're simply making up for a broken nap for a short period of time or through a regression or disruption, then bringing bedtime forward can be really helpful. During periods of sleep disruption, whether that's a sleep regression or an illness, whether you're on holidays or you have somebody else caring for your child while you are at work or away on a holiday, whatever it is, it's super common to come out of a period of sleep disruption with habits that maybe are not favorable. This happens all the time. There are always going to be periods of disruption where you have to intervene to support your child more, most commonly through sleep regressions, but also through sickness, where you go, you know what, I know that you need more from me. I know that while we practice independent sleep often, today you need a contact nap, or today you need to be cuddled to sleep, and that's fine. I always want you to know that you can support your child no matter how they need to go to sleep in times where they need an extra hand. But it is important to continue to come back to getting back on track. And so how can we do that? We don't panic, we stay consistent, and then we offer support where needed. So the very first thing I want you to do, if you have a child that's off track and you're looking at different ways to get back to, having a great little sleeper, is very first thing, check in on your schedule and make sure it's still age appropriate. If it's been an extended period of time, we want to make sure that we are still working with wake windows that are appropriate to your child's age, and we're working with the same number of naps. And then go back to your original sleep training technique. So if you used Ferber, start using Ferber again. If you used Gentle 3 or Gentle 5, if you use pick up, put down, whatever it was that you chose to use in the initial instance, you can start using again. If you didn't sleep train, you want to foster independent sleep, particularly as your child gets older. You really want them to be able to fall asleep in their crib on their own. So maybe you choose to sleep train, maybe you do a very gentle sleep training method, whatever it is, you want to go back to allowing your child to fall asleep independently. You can implement stronger routines, longer routines. You can draw out bedtime so that you're really giving your child the best opportunity to follow through on those routines and understand what is being asked of them. I always, I try and relate this to, if somebody just plunks you in a spot and then walks out of the room and you're like, well, what am I doing here? If you have a consistent routine, if you have a series of cues, even though you may not understand what's going on, you still understand those cues are promoting or pointing you to a specific outcome. I first am going to be fed, then I'm going to have a bath, then I'm going to have a book, then I'm going to go to bed. And if we do that every night, then you start to recognize those cues become cues to go to sleep. And in periods of uncertainty or significant disruption, if I spend extra time reading with you, I'm giving you more time to prepare for the fact that you're going to go to sleep. If we spend an extra long time in the bath, all of these things, you're getting extra time to adjust to what's being asked of you, which is now you're going to go to sleep. These are also drawing out bedtime routines are super helpful when you have a baby that's just on the cusp of being overtired. You're reducing stimuli, you're bringing music or bringing noise down, you're turning lights down low. So all of these things are calming and soothing. So promote this beginning of rest rather than, staying downstairs in the living room with bright lights, which is continuing to overstimulate your already overstimulated, already overtired child. The last thing we want to do is if you are really off track, I highly suggest you structure your day for familiarity. This means, really giving yourself a good few days at home to really focus on getting baby back on track. And so it's not always possible, I think, particularly when you have older children, trying to really focus in on a nap schedule when you've got school pickups and after school activities, maybe you've got parent teacher meetings. It's not always possible, but structuring your day around trying to be at home for naps just while you're getting back on track can be really helpful. Obviously, when your child is in a stroller, maybe they're sleeping sometimes, maybe they're sleeping not all the time, maybe they're awake. And it's very difficult for them to discern. And so if you are structuring your day and making sure they're going to sleep in their crib while you're getting them back on track, they know exactly what is being asked of them at that time. And it just becomes easier for them to get used to getting back on track. So whenever we enter a period of disruption, I always want you to come back to these 3 pillars: the don't panic, stay consistent, and offer extra support as needed. And no matter what the disruption is, things will always go back to normal. Okay, that is it from me. I would love to take some time and answer some questions now, if you have them.
Katie, can you explain the clock-based schedule? It sounds like that's maybe something that's apart from wake windows.
Yeah, for sure. So around 6 months, we tend to switch our babies from clock-based schedules from wake windows to clock-based schedules. The reason that we do that, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen actually. Let me just do this. Okay. So the reason that we do that is that they're less sensitive to the 5-10 minute change. So a 4-month-old, for example, if you go over a wake window by 10 minutes, it can actually push them into being overtired. And they're really sensitive, where by 6 months, as their rhythms are starting to balance out, as their circadian rhythm is balancing out, as their sleep is becoming more predictable, you move them to a clock-based schedule. And so that Teddy, I think is Teddy on 2 naps or 3 naps?
3.
He's still on 3. So he at 6 months is probably just coming into when you can move him to a clock-based schedule. And that is you set specific times. And we start doing things like crib hour, where I know you can sleep for more than 40 minutes. I know your sleep is predictable. And therefore I'm going to put you in your crib from 8 till 9, and you're going to sleep from 8 till 9. And this is when sleep training starts to really offer good benefits, because they generally will go into their crib and sleep for the allotted time.
Okay, I think that's what my daycare is doing. They're putting him down at the same time, it looks like, every day.
Yeah, often with daycares, they have set sleep times, and that can be really difficult when you have a younger baby, because it tends to break nights because they're not getting the right day sleep. But around like 6-7 months, when you move them to a clock-based schedule, they're a lot more adaptable in that time. And then often you can add in a 3rd nap if daycare is not offering it or something along those lines. But like a lot of daycares, just because it's easier to manage the sheer volume of babies, the number of babies, they have set like quiet times.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. I'm just going to answer the question in chat. Okay. So toddlers drop. How old is your toddler? Madavi?
Sorry. Yeah, he's 12 months.
He's
So
12 months.
yes, and now he's like kind of fighting the second nap instead of, because he's in daycare too, and
Yep.
daycare, of course, been in transition. They're gonna put him down at like in the afternoon, but he's like struggling because the transition is gonna happen. So I'm trying to prepare myself and wondering like if I can
So
do something to switch it up.
generally at 12 months, they still need the 2 naps. And so if you can talk to your daycare and ask, a lot of time they'll still continue to offer. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they are still doing it. So they're saying like after 15 months he's transitioning to 1 nap.
Yeah.
That's when he's gonna switch to the afternoon nap, but he's more into like the morning nap than the afternoon nap. And yeah, it's been a like
Oh,
I
okay.
don't
So what will happen between now, so 12 months and 15 months, is actually often we see the wake windows swap for toddlers. So up
oh,
until
okay.
this point, he's had shorter wake windows in the morning, up to longer wake windows before bed. And then sometime between, usually it's like 13 to 15 months, you'll start to see that actually that swaps and he has a significantly longer wake window in the morning than he does in the afternoon. So by the time he's 2, you'll find his wake window in the morning is actually closer to like 6 hours and his wake window in the afternoon is only 4. So a lot of toddlers around 18 months to 2 years, they'll nap from 12 till 3 and then go to bed at 7. So
Okay.
you'll find they're waking at 7, they're up for 5 hours, then they sleep, and then they're up for 4 hours. And then as they go later, closer to 2 years, then that nap goes from sort of 12 to 12:30 to 1, and that morning wake window becomes longer.
Okay.
So it should happen on its own, and it should happen naturally before they transition him to 1 nap. If not, what you want to do is stretch his morning wake window very, very slowly. And so you can actually help him transition through this by adding 15 minutes to his morning wake window
Okay.
every couple of days. And if he's struggling, then pause and do that time. So say he's 12 months. So he's napping at like 9:30, waking at 7, napping at 9:30 or 10.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so day 1, you'd move that nap, say it starts at 10 normally, you do 10:15. And day 2, you do 10:15. Day 3, you do 10:30. And then day 4, you do 10:30. Day 5, you would do 10:45. And if at 10:45, you're like, he is a screaming, crying mess at 10:30, then you just put him to bed at 10:30 and give him extra time to adjust. And when he seems fine with 10:30, then you move it to 10:45. And so you just do that really slowly for them. And then you'll see it'll naturally progress.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I have a question. I have a 2-month-old that's waking up at like 5 a.m. Do you suggest just like waking up with him at that time or trying to like I've had little success trying to lull him back to sleep.
Are you feeding at the 5 a.m.?
So like he'll wake up at like, 4 and then I'll feed him till 4:30 and then he'll fall asleep for like a half hour and then wake back up at 5.
I would continue to try. It's really hard. So at 2 months old, they're still working with an imbalanced circadian rhythm. I'm sure, have you heard of day and night confusion?
Yeah.
So you're still trying to balance that out. I would keep trying to keep the room very, very dark. I would keep everything very quiet, no noise, keep the room very dark, keep him as quiet as possible. And then whenever your wake time would be, which would be 7 a.m. normally, you would bang the lights on, open the curtains. So then we're starting to use really strong cues that now we're awake, now we play.
Okay.
I also would just check in at 8 weeks. It's still just his bedtime should be around 9ish, 8:30, 9ish.
Okay.
Around 10 weeks, you can start to bring that forward. And as you start to bring that forward, then you should be able to extend his morning more. But really what you're doing is trying to give him as many cues as possible that nighttime is for sleeping, daytime is for activity. So we want to really focus on things like exposure to daylight, putting him to sleep in louder places.
Yeah.
And then at night, as soon as the sun goes down, it's very quiet.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Thank you.
It should, by like 10 weeks, you can start to bring that forward. And then as you bring the bedtime forward, you can get longer, like you should be able to push it. And right now it's just about like feeding and putting him back to sleep, feeding, putting him back to sleep, lulling him as much as you can.
Well, 7 a.m. sounds like a late wake time for me now. So thank you.
Is he still sleeping pretty well for you during the day?
Yeah, he sleeps. I need to like get him to sleep sort of because he sort of fights it. But if I just like talk to him or rock him a bit, then he falls asleep fine during the day.
Yeah. Okay. And then he should still be getting like pretty good amounts of day sleep.
Yeah, he gets good amounts of day sleep. So I think we're okay there.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not an overtired situation. It's just that he's 8 weeks old. So I would just keep trying to lull him back, give him all the cues that he should still be sleeping. There are a few techniques that you can use that try and soothe him back down, keeping him in his crib as much as possible. Because we find as you start to take him out, that is a cue to him that like, oh, mom's here, it's time to play. So
Okay.
trying to keep him in his crib, trying to keep him, or in his bed, rather, trying to keep his environment dark, his environment quiet, free of any stimulus, free of anything that would indicate to him that it's time to play.
Got it. No 5 a.m. playtime.
No 5 a.m. playtime. And then, yeah, just around like hang in there for 2 more weeks. And
Okay, I think I can do that.
You're very close. You're
So
almost there.
close.
All right, Amber. You have a 7-month-old that's pulling to stand up. Well, I'm sorry. Okay, so wow, you have a 7-month-old. That's incredible. I would be practicing those skills as much as possible during the day, and I would actually do it in his crib. So you want him to learn. This is what we were talking about around physical skill development and a motor skill causing a sleep regression. He obviously is able to get himself into a position and then not get himself out. So you want to focus as much as possible with as much free time as you have about getting up and then also getting back down. If he's crashing back down, unfortunately, you just really have to work with him. The hitting the side of the crib, it's hard because you'd want to put a bumper in, but you can't. So I don't think I've ever heard of a 7-month-old who was able to pull themselves to stand in a wood crib. That's incredible. You just have to practice. You just have to practice. And then sleep training. If you haven't, sorry, Amber, have you sleep trained already? Amber? Okay, okay, Amber, if you are there still, I actually can't hear you. If you haven't sleep trained, I would, but I would with more physical support. And so if you see him climbing into a position where you think he's going to fall over and hurt himself, you can just go in and lay him down. And so sleep training techniques, often you want to be as hands-off as possible. With things like Ferber, you're allowed to go in for a 30-second check at certain intervals. What I would do is something more along the lines of Gentle 5, which is similar, but allows for more frequent check-ins. And so rather than giving him these huge, long, extended periods of time where he's in his crib, that's okay. If you can answer in the box if you want. You can just answer in the messages. Or maybe I'll try and unmute you. I don't think I can. But yeah, I would do something that has a shorter, more high touch method of of calming and soothing, and then I would use those to just lay him back down, which is, it goes completely against what I would normally say for a skills-based regression. For skills-based regressions, we often want to offer cues that then promote them completing the skill on their own. But because he's so young, if he does not have the ability to soothe independently already, yeah, so I would just go in and lay him down. Really, I would be as careful, like I would be quite careful to not engage if that's possible. So not going in and soothing him and, you know, patting him for long, like rubbing his belly. I would just go in, lie him down and leave, and then continue on with the sleep training. And actually, you'll find that he should figure it out pretty quickly. Kids adapt pretty well. And if he is actually hurting himself when he's falling, he's going to learn really quickly not to do certain things. And in the meanwhile, I would just go in and lay him down, go in and lay him down, and just do it gently, but don't engage. So don't pick him up and cuddle him and then put him down. Just very gently lay him back down and leave the room, without overly engaging with him. That makes sense. Anybody else have any questions? Amber, was that helpful?
I am sorry, I disconnected. I think I have my microphone working now.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, I just missed the last part, but yeah, he it's pretty wild because my other older kiddo was not doing any of this. But yeah, he's able to pull up. He tried cruising today. And he's
That's great.
he's 7 months on the 5th, so he's not even quite there. But yeah, he's just hurting himself in the crib. So I ended up purchasing a mesh sided crib, like a travel crib.
Yeah, pack and play.
Yeah, like a pack and play. Our pediatrician had said that might be safer for right now because developmentally he might need obviously some more time where it would be more typical the skills and things he's trying to do.
Yeah, I mean that's great. The other thing is you could, if he looks like he's banging on the top, you can get soft padding for the top, like a table bumper for the top. You just can't use that in the bottom. So it depends on where he's hitting in the crib. But yeah, it's really uncommon that a 7-month-old would be able to climb like that. And so I'm not, like, normally with a baby that's standing, they're physically capable of at least somehow putting themselves down or hanging on. And if they're within the window, then they're going to figure it out really quickly. But because he's so young, I don't know how long it's going to take him to figure out how to lie back down. And so if you do, I think the pack and play is a great idea. And if you do choose to do sleep training, I would just, every time you see him stand up, just go in and lie him down, or at least get him down to his bum, so you're teaching him how to lie down properly. But you know, where an older baby would be able to use the strength from their arms to scale back down, for example, I doubt that he's got the dexterity to do that yet.
No, he just picked up crawling a couple weeks ago, and he crawls right into the slats. He pulls up, he just lets go, he hits his head, he's just like wild in there, and he can't get back down, and it's like I'm gonna let go, and he just goes flying.
He just goes flying. Yeah, the pack and play is probably your best bet. Your pediatrician, I think pack and play for sure for now. And then as soon as he masters the art of sitting back down, I think you'll find in the pack and play, actually, if he's using the wood frame to climb up, the pack and play will actually stop him from climbing up completely.
Okay.
So he won't be able to get himself up in the pack and play, and so he won't be able to come back down.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. Thank you.
That's also crazy. You're going to have a unicorn baby that runs at like 9 months.
Yeah, it's been busy.
Anybody else have any questions?
I still have you. If no one else has a question, I just wanted to ask about like transitioning to independent sleep. So he was in the bassinet, and then due to this whole crib thing, when I tried to transition him out, I can't have him in the bassinet because it has a weight limit. Now he's like pulling up. So it's like I just brought him into the bed because I was like, I don't know where else to put him. But now he's been in the bed. I do, with co-sleeping, he's been breastfeeding, but it's gotten to a point where I can time it. So it's usually at midnight, and usually he feeds at 3.
Okay.
And then he goes through till like 7:30. So with I envision this independent sleep thing you're talking about. And somehow, yeah, I just got stuck with the crib piece. But yeah, now that we're at this point where I can time his naps during the day as well. He's usually taking 4, and they're pretty much like spaced out evenly. And then he goes to bed usually around 8.
Okay. What time's he waking up?
Like 7:30, 7 o'clock.
Okay. He's probably, how long are his naps?
Well, if it's a contact nap, it's a lot longer.
Yeah.
But usually like 20 minutes by himself, maybe up to 45 minutes. Occasionally he'll have like a really long nap, like over an hour. But lately they've been shorter because I've been trying to not be there
Yeah.
for the nap.
Fair enough. Okay, so at 7 months, typically we'd see them being on 3, transitioning to 2 naps. You might find that his naps are so short because he's not awake for long enough between them. And so around 7 months, we see like a 2, 3, 4 schedule. So 2 hours in the morning, and then their first nap, and then 3 hours in between, and then their second nap, and then 4 hours before bed. If they're still on a 3 nap schedule, it's kind of 2, 2.5, and then 3, and then 3. So when it comes to independent sleep, are you interested in sleep training?
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with anything in particular. I mean, I know about it, but I don't really know anything specific. Like I've not explored any like programs or trainings or anything.
Okay, so there's a million different options of techniques that you can use, and they range from basically high tactile, higher involvement, which typically takes longer, and then lower involvement, more crying, more fussing,
Yeah.
complaining, and then it's faster. So you have options like pick up, put down, which are very physical. It's like every time baby fusses or cries, you pick them up, you calm them, you put them back down, but you're putting them back down awake. So you're letting them go to sleep independently. It takes, to be honest, it takes a month or more. And it's a lot of frequent picking up.
Okay.
You have techniques like the gentle 3-minute drill, which you go in every 3 minutes while they're fussing or complaining and kind of put a hand on their chest, soothe them, calm them down, and then leave without taking them out of their crib. So they're still awake. You're constantly there, being more present and more tactile, and then sticking with it over a long period of time while they then learn to put themselves to sleep independently. That one, it really depends on your baby's temperament. If you have a baby that is sort of very adaptable, very confident, I'm going to use the word confident, but they're very chill in their resolve, and they tend to sometimes be putting themselves to sleep anyways, gentle 3, gentle 5 are really good options. And then it ranges all the way up to fervor, which is it's extending periods of time. And so on night 1, you do 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10-minute check-in, and then every 10 minutes thereafter. And then night 2, you do 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And then night 3, you do, I think it's 10, 12, 15, and ongoing. And so you're intervening or supporting less and less and less over time, but constantly going in to be like, I'm there. So you are still checking in, you're just giving greater time between.
Okay.
They're all efficient is, I guess, what I'm trying to convey. It's just that some work faster than others. And so it depends on what you personally are comfortable with, and then the type of temperament that your baby has. I really like, for younger babies, I like gentle 5. So he's 7 months old. That's probably a really good one for him because it gives you the opportunity to go in and support more often. For babies that are older, say 12 months, 15 months, I like options like the Sleep Lady, which is you're there, day 1, you have your hand on them. Day 2, you're in a chair, but beside the crib. Day 3, you're in a chair a couple feet away from the crib. Day 4, you're in the middle of the room. Day 5, you're in the doorway. Day 6, you're in the hallway. so a lot of them are faded. You're reducing the amount of time. I have a blog post I can send you that sort of details several different options that you can have a look at.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That they all have some degree of fussing or complaining. And then it ranges right up to full cry it out or extinction, which is you put your baby in bed, you say goodnight, and you see them in the morning. So it just depends on where you are in terms of your comfort level with crying, and then what the type of temperament that your baby has.
Okay, thank you. One last question, just about independent sleep.
Yep.
And I eventually will have my child with a caretaker or in daycare, but I just wanted to ask about like the benefits of that versus kind of, we're sort of all over right now, at least for me. And I know there's some families that choose to continue co-sleeping, and that's just what they do and that works. But I know in time that he'll be in a situation where he'll need to do some sleeping independently. So do they sleep better? Do they sleep longer? Is it better for them, like for self-soothing? They have that skill. I'm just curious.
So it really comes down to personal preference in terms of what you're comfortable with. We see in periods of greater stress or sleep disruption that babies who have stronger self-settling techniques or skills are able to return back to stronger sleeping situations with independent sleeping skills. And so if your baby is sick, for example, they'll probably wake more frequently because they're congested, because they don't feel great. And rather than those sleep disruptions taking an hour and a half or 2 hours in the middle of the night each time, when you have really strong self-settling skills, they're able to put themselves back to sleep faster and therefore rest and recover. We also see that babies who have stronger self-settling skills, self-soothing skills, in times, where their environment changes. And so if you have a baby in daycare, if you frequently need to go out of town for business, and so you're constantly dropping your baby off at a parent or like a grandparent or caregiver's house, and they're sleeping in different environments, the baby is able to go to sleep faster, stay asleep longer, and soothe themselves in the middle of the night. So we see less shorter periods of disruption in the event of night wakings. So also, if they're going to daycare, they're sleeping in a louder, more disrupted environment. A baby that has stronger independent sleep skills, self-soothing skills, is able to put themselves to sleep and stay asleep longer. We also see babies that are sleep trained, they wake less in the night, and so they're getting more of that restorative sleep that we know that they need to grow and develop. But that's not to say that if you're co-sleeping, that your baby's not getting that sleep. And so if you are finding that, you're co-sleeping, your baby is waking to feed at midnight at 3, but going back to sleep quickly. And so personally, I've always been terrified to co-sleep, just because it really frightens me. But if you are doing it safely and you are, following the guidelines and you are getting the sleep you need, you're sure your baby's getting the sleep that you need, then it's completely personal preference. You can still sleep train and co-sleep. So making sure your baby's in a safe sleep space to start the night, teaching them independent sleep skills, and then bringing them into bed if you need to. I think the difficulty with co-sleeping is often it leads to members of the family not getting the sleep that they need. That's where it gets complicated, is if baby is using you as a soother all night, and so waking you all night, and you as a mother are not able to get the sleep that you need and then function appropriately the next day because you've been awake all night, like that's when it becomes a problem. If you have a caregiver that your baby will only sleep for, so if you're rocking your baby to sleep and they only go to sleep when you are the one rocking them, and then somebody else has to come in and look after them, and so they just don't sleep at all, these are environments where it then becomes complicated. I personally am a huge fan of teaching independent sleep skills, simply because we've moved around a lot, we've changed environments a lot, and I think it has like for my son in particular, it's given him the ability to go to sleep in different environments and get the rest that he needs. And he's an incredibly sleep dependent baby. And so I guess he's not a baby anymore. But he was very sleep dependent. If he missed a nap, if he had a cat nap, it was awful for everyone. It was awful for him because he would lose his ability to cope. Like he would just be incredibly fussy. He would cry all the time. You could see he was having a really hard time. And then when he got the sleep that he needed, he was just generally more content. My daughter, for example, is a lot more adaptable. She, you can take her out, she can do things, she can miss a nap, and mostly she's fine. So it depends a lot on the baby, a lot on you and your personal preference. And I think as long as you are doing things safely and following safe sleep guidelines, then it's really up to you in terms of what you want to do.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Well, sleeping was going well until he started crawling. And so like last night he was trying to crawl off the bed and it was just me just half awake trying to catch him. And so that's really why I'm looking for some guidance. So.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they start moving, if you have a very active baby, and you do have a very active baby, then you become like a human fortress all night long. And then it really starts to be difficult for you to function. And if you can't function, you can't look after him. And so he's probably a good baby for sleep, like for independent sleep. I think, you can do it with him in the room still, if that makes you more comfortable. So you can set the pack and play up beside your bed. It depends. I'd make sure your environment was super, like a lot of times our rooms don't have the same level of blackout. It's hard to sleep with white noise as well. So those things, but there's no reason you can't keep him close to you in the room, in the pack and play, if that makes you feel more comfortable. And it still offers, the connection. There are co-sleepers, which still will put up a barrier. Although if he's sitting and standing, he can't be in a co-sleeper either. So he's kind of pack and play or bust, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
But I mean, you can still have him close to you, still have him in your room if you want. There's no reason why he has to be in his own room. It's not like there's enormous benefits from teaching or offering independent sleep skills and he has to be in the nursery. Like that's not the case. You can always have him close to you, still have him within arm's reach, if that makes you feel better.
Okay. Thank you. And then for the blog post, can you share, is there a link or
I will pop it. Give me 1 second. I'll do that right now before I forget.
So to recap, you said he'd be a good candidate to drop a nap, it sounds like.
Yes, I do think he's probably ready to drop a nap.
Okay.
I'll send you wake windows as well while I'm here. If he is taking 20-minute naps, I think you'll probably find that he is not awake for long enough between them. And so he doesn't have the right amount of sleep pressure. And so we talk a lot about, in my business, there you go.
Thank you.
Undertired versus overtired. And so undertired, so both of those things manifest with short naps, fighting sleep, and not getting those big, long restorative chunks of sleep that we're looking for. A lot of the time, the best way to look or to understand is mood. And so if he is popping open at the 20-minute mark, pretty happy, super content.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's undertired. And so at 7 months,
okay.
let me just get this up, make sure so at 7 months, his wake windows are 2 to 4 hours. Normally with a very active baby like he is, I would expect his nap transition to be later, but that's his nap transition from 3 naps to 2 naps. The transition from 4 naps to 3 naps would typically happen for around 4 or 5 months. He's super active. He's probably higher on the sleep scale. So maybe it's more recent than that, which is not totally uncommon. But I would think that he would be better on 3 naps. And then probably you're looking at like a 3 nap and then 2 nap transition pretty quickly. So you could even go from 4 naps to 2 naps. So I would try on 3 first and see how he does. With 3, you would have him. So if he's up at 7, you would probably go back down at like 9:15, 9:30, try and get each nap to be a full hour. And actually, Amber, do I have your email? Did you?
I'm not sure. I can put it in the chat.
Could you put it in the chat? Because what I'll do is I'll email you a schedule that you can work with to start. Because if you're going to sleep train, then you may as well sleep train and make sure you're on the right nap schedule at the same time. Because if you're sleep training with a nap schedule that's not quite right, it's going to make it really difficult. It's going to make it harder for him to learn. It's going to be longer and extended, and you'll find that he'll just fight against certain naps anyways, and then bedtime broken. So let's get you a good schedule, and then once you're on a good schedule, I can help you pick a sleep training technique too.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Does anybody else have any questions?
Sorry, just one more. What do you think about dream feeding? Like trying to feed them right before? Yeah, you know what that is.
I love a dream feed. I love a dream feed.
Okay.
I love a dream feed for many reasons. If you have a cranky or fussy baby, a dream feed is a very cozy, cuddly feed, which is why I love them the most. However, it's really good at extending that chunk of night sleep. And so you probably aren't seeing any long stretches of night sleep yet because he's still very young. But like 10, 11 weeks, you start to see a good longer stretch of that first sleep. But because you're starting to put him down at 7 at that point, that first stretch starts at your dinner time and ends usually around when you're going to sleep. And so what the dream feed does is it pushes the first natural wake feeding later into the night. So around 12, 13 weeks, we start to see that dream feed really start to pay off as baby pushes that first natural wake feed through till 2 or 3 in the morning. And so if you are feeding at 10, then you get this stretch from 10:30 till 3, where otherwise, if you were going to bed at 10, baby's probably waking up at 11.
Got it.
So starting a dream feed practice at 8 weeks is great because they're still super drowsy and they're used to being taken out of the crib, fed, and put back. If you start doing it at 4 or 5 months, it can be really hard because by that point they're awake and alert. So you take them out of the crib and they're like, well, we're awake. Now we're awake for a party. But when you start doing it at a young age, even though you don't immediately get the benefit of the long stretch, they get used to being taken out of their crib and fed and placed back in. And
so even if I'm putting him to sleep at like 9, you think like waking him up at 10 for a dream feed is still like a good idea?
I think if you're putting him to sleep at 9, it's probably 11.
Okay.
If you're putting him to sleep at 8:30, then 10:30 is fine because he can really only go 2-3 hours anyways.
Okay, got it.
I assume that you're not seeing him for much more than 2 or 3, or he's not sleeping for more than 2 or 3 hours at a time.
You know what he is? He sleeps from like 10:30 until 4-ish.
Oh, that's very good. That's very good. You're very lucky.
Well, but then he's up, so I don't know.
No, it will pay off as that bedtime comes forward. That's when the dream feed really starts to be super beneficial.
Yeah.
If you have somebody else in the house that can do the dream feed, then we like to stagger. So if you have a partner or a family member who's in your home with you that can do the 10:30 feed, then you could maybe go to bed at 9 or 8:30 or 8, and then somebody else can do the dream feed at 10:30, and then you actually have an opportunity to get like 4, 5, 6 hours of sleep.
Okay, amazing.
Feeding.
Great, thank you.
But no, I had a very, very fussy newborn with my son. Like he screamed all the time except the dream feed. So
oh, you're like, oh, sweet baby.
I think I gave him a dream feed. Like I woke him to feed him for dawn feeding. I broke all the rules, but I gave him a dream feed until he was like 7 months old.
You're like, I'm still dream feeding him. He's 5.
I always said that I would the last thing I would do before he walked down the aisle was nurse him. Like I was just, because the only time he wasn't screaming. So yeah, but outside of just it being cozy, it's actually a really good opportunity to help everyone in the house get more sleep because you're offering a dream, like you're extending the first natural waking.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you for being here. I absolutely love doing these webinars. I really enjoy them. So thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to be here with us.
Thank you, Katie.
Well, yeah, we'll speak to you. I'll let you know when the next one is. I'll send out an email. I am going to post this to YouTube, and if you have any objection, please let me know. I will cut your name out of it. Otherwise, I will send around the link as well.
Thanks so much.